We're on to 2018-19 school year calendar, and I'll start with Superintendent Pontrelli on that.
Thank you. This evening we are going to revisit for you the calendars. Last week we presented to you calendar A and a calendar B. This is the time of year when we start getting questions from our families as we move into the holidays, what our calendar for the next year will be. And when we shared these with you last week, some of the questions that came forward were, what about some of those weeks that seem to have shorter days and have given us more inconsistency with full weeks? And so I'm going to ask Director McDowell to share with you. We tried to make this clear, and as we did so, we went forward with your suggestions at looking at making some of the weeks less choppy, and he's going to explain to you so that we're clear on what your calendar choices are, because we've gone from kind of a B+ to a C on changes. So I'll turn it over to Director McDowell.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board Chair Heppner and School Board, essentially I think the easiest way to walk through it is, I know that in the document, it says the recommendation is to make a choice between A and B. And essentially what I'm recommending that I'll talk through is that you choose whether or not draft B+ is what it's been labeled as, to keep everything clear, is really what we're trying to decide or have you decide tonight. And so here's essentially what has happened with the changes. You were presented with two calendar options last week. One calendar option looked very similar to this year's calendar. The other calendar option had changes to the first days of school that you've heard people speak at open forum. So it included the addition of Ready, Set, Go conferencing K-5 rather than just Ready, Set, Go conferencing through K. It also included a start for the first day of just 6th and 9th grade, if you remember. So essentially, draft B, if you have that, and that's what's on the document camera as well, draft B+. If I walk you through the calendar, in August, we maintain those 4 days starting August 27th, where August 27th, 6th and 9th grade would start. That allows us to do our introductory days for web and for Link Crew with those students, which was a very well-received program this year to start those days off. It also has the potential to allow for teachers who aren't directly related to those students to have more time to plan together if they're not directly related. It also allows them to interact with students when they only have a smaller group of students in the building. And I know, having been up at the high school, that was a pretty big deal this year for the other staff members who weren't directly involved with Link Crew to be able to interact with students. On the 28th then, we would add 7th grade, 8th grade, and 10th through 12th grade. And at the elementary level on those 2 days is when Ready, Set, Go conferencing would be going on. And what I'll remind you is that we got rave reviews of the K Ready, Set, Go conferencing. This recommendation is coming from our teaching staff, which has been presented to you multiple times at this point. It will allow for us in K through 5 to do Ready, Set, Go and social emotional work with our students on an individual basis. Then what will happen is on August 30th through the school year, we're on our full schedule, pre-K through 21. What the changes then that happened that were requested based off the school board were, can we reduce the amount of broken weeks in the school year? So we took a look between last board meeting and this board meeting, and the changes that we were able to come up with to do this were, you'll notice in October, the week that is typically MEA week, so that is Monday the 15th, then Tuesday the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. Typically, we've gone to school those 3 days, and then there's MEA. And then we have the following Monday and Tuesday, so in this calendar it would have been the 22nd and 23rd, where there wasn't school. That's the way it's designed this year. It's the way it was last year as well. What we did is shifted those 2 days, the 22nd and the 23rd, up to the 15th and 16th. And then what typically happens is, because of teacher conferences, we have what are called give back days, and we plugged that day in, the give back day, originally into June 4th. So Monday and Tuesday, now 15 and 16, become the conference prep day and the PD day. And then we took June 4th and we made that October 17th. So here's what that does. By using those 3 days, you now have a full week off, but what you reduce it is you don't have a 3-day week and then a 3-day week. So you gain, you go to school, the kids go to school the same amount of time, but we have one more solid week in that first semester. So that's the change from last week for first semester. Then in second semester, I'll bring your attention to April. In the calendar that you were presented last week, April had the 19th as just a non-duty day. It was grayed out. And then the PD day was on Monday the 22nd. All right, so what we did, and so that gave you 2 4-day weeks. So what we did there is we removed the PD day from the 22nd, and we made April 19th the PD day, and so therefore you gained back another full week. So essentially what we've gone from is a calendar that had 25 full 5-day weeks in it to a calendar that now has 27 full-day weeks in it. So again, the recommendation that I have for you tonight is based upon what was presented last week, and then based off of your input and the request to look at full-day weeks, the 2 changes that I noted. And again, it impacts October, that week of MEA, which switches from 2 3-day weeks to the entire week is non-student contact for MEA week, and then the week in April, where we move from 2 4-day weeks to 1 4-day week and a 5-day week. Everything else in this proposal that you're looking at is the same as what we were recommending in option B last week. So again, my recommendation tonight is to have you vote on whether or not draft B plus is the calendar for the 18-19 school year.
Okay, the recommendation, calendar committee, B plus.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I just apologize. The reason for the lateness is as we follow process, we have a calendar committee. And so as I put this together, I needed to make sure I got with all the people on the calendar committee and got feedback from them, because we have a process of making sure of checks and balances that we have the right amount of days, that we're not missing something in the calendar, that we're not overlapping something. And just as a reminder, the calendar committee is made up of an elementary teacher, a secondary teacher, an elementary principal, a secondary principal, myself, and as needed, Barb and Kathy and any of the other directors, depending upon any issues that we potentially could run into.
Okay, and the recommendation is B plus.
The recommendation from the committee is B plus.
Okay, could I get a motion for an acceptance of draft B plus for the 2018-19 school year calendar?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion. Questions for Dr. McDowell?
Dr. McDowell, we had a question up here. Could you just clarify for us that the testing, ACT testing, and are we all right still with that if we move to the full week schedule? Do we have to worry about ACT testing over at MEA?
No, because those 3 days, it comes into that area, but that...
We have flexibility with
we have flexibility in there with ACT testing, because we're only shifting the days 1 week, and we're actually shifting them back.
Thank you.
Director Stivland.
Hi, yeah, you might have said this and I missed it, but so we have a C calendar and we have a B plus calendar. What's the difference?
So the C calendar was the one that I had emailed you this morning.
Okay.
I put C on it. If you look at the C calendar, what I forgot to put in there is those notations in August, because I was working off of that one, and Barb had your official calendar already in your packet, and so that's why we decided to call it B plus, because it's just, calendars get confusing when we have them all running around, right?
Okay.
We aren't trying to
So
confuse
C
you more.
where-
So basically, they're the same, it's just that C doesn't have the notation on it.
Yes, in talking with a few of you, the recommendation was it's going to be confusing if you didn't see the 27th, 28th, and 29th marked as they were last week.
So to, go ahead, Sarah.
No, go ahead.
So to be clear for the board, our recommendation is B+, which is the calendar that incorporates the Ready, Set, Go conferences, which will help support your work for World's Best Workforce with our teachers and focusing on literacy. And then also gives you less broken up weeks, which is one of the things that you shared was important for families.
So I just wanted to ask the other question of, so it sounded like you didn't have any parent representation on that calendar committee, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
We don't have parents as part of the calendar committee.
Okay, so I mentioned this last week too, I believe, when we were looking at this, that I have a huge concern with this split up week. The beginning of the school year, I absolutely understand that teachers need time to do assessments. I just don't know if this is the only way it can be done, and if this is causing too much of a burden on our families to try to figure out the logistics. I mean, I think trying to find time to assess our students as we see fit is our issue as a district. That's a problem that we as educators have to figure out. But in this case, I feel like it's putting a burden on our families to try to make arrangements to appear at school at a particular time. People have to take a huge amount of half day off of work or full day off of work, come get their kids, take them to be, if you have 3 or 4 kids, it just seems like asking a lot of our families, and I would have really liked to have seen some input from the families, on this issue. The other question I have about this is that, are we going to be consistently moving to a before Labor Day kind of thing? Or is that done, or is that part of the conversation? I think there are a lot of families out there, myself included, that really, really appreciate having that last week. People who are very connected with the state fair, for example, have kids who are very involved with the state fair, appreciate having the start the day after Labor Day so they can be involved in those things. So those are just some of the thoughts I had about some concerns I have with this, with either of these choices.
Director Pearson.
So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to table this until we can get feedback from families and staff members, and I'll share why if I get a second.
I would second that.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Do you want to say something first?
I do. One of the things I'd like to share is I appreciate your comment, Director Stivlin, about the parent input. And what I do want to remind our community is that we have surveyed the community several years in a row now about the pluses and minuses of starting early before Labor Day, and it consistently comes back as a split. And so for us, because we're a learning organization, I understand the state fair is important, and that's why we have a Thursday in there so that families can still go. But it really gives us, we feel like a jump start and more time with our students before they go into some of their testing. So I wanted to add that it isn't that we haven't reached out to families about that, but it's consistent. And that isn't just within Stillwater. That we find that with many families, it's about 50-50 about what they'd like. The other piece I'd like to comment on is that several people have shared is the Ready, Set, Go conferences for our kindergarten, which is our youngest students, was really well received this year. We didn't receive any concerns from families. The parents that I spoke with and teachers were very supportive of that time to connect with students and families. And that's also a thing that I've heard the board talk about is taking more time to connect with students and families. And it is really a difficult, when you speak about it's our school district's issue to figure this out, it is an issue, but I think it's also one that we need to do in partnership.
We would not be
Pearson.
I was just going to add, we wouldn't be the first district to do this. So when you look at it from the standpoint of, are we just pulling this out of a hat somewhere? We're not. It's a process that other districts have used and continue to use as well for some of and for the same purposes.
Thank you.
Director Pearson.
Well, thank you first for looking at those broken weeks. I think that'll be better for everybody to have less of those broken weeks. And I just want to thank also the staff that we've been hearing from in support of this, and then some also with concerns. And I just want to share my concerns that some that Director Stivlin mentioned, but I'm concerned that staggering start days will be a hardship for some families who rely on older siblings to watch the younger siblings on days off of school. And I don't know how far-reaching that is, so I think that it would be helpful to know how many does this affect. When it's a little different, I think, when you're looking at kindergarten opposed to K-5, and then are there a lot of younger siblings who are home with their older siblings? Number two, I also am concerned that we have not had a serious discussion about pre or post Labor Day start. I think a lot of parents think that was just because of the bond, and really want to know, is this how it is going forward? And so I would like to hear from people. I don't have that much of an opinion. I always started before Labor Day, but I would like to really consider the reasons families have for wanting to do it either way. And to me, making it about testing is unacceptable. I think in our community, too, we want our students to achieve, but to make it about how they do on a test isn't acceptable. And then I have heard some feedback that the kindergarten conferences still have some kinks to work out, that maybe it'd be better to do them another year and really get everything worked out before adding in other grades. And I share the concern that there's no parents. I served on the calendar committee one year, and it's not like it's a really exciting committee, but I think families add a different aspect, that you have your job of what to add, and everybody has their job, but to not have parents weighing in, I think does impact somewhat. So I'd like to see more parent involvement in that. And then I have heard that there are some staff members who are afraid to speak up when they have people telling them to email the board in support, that there are some who don't want to speak up, and so there are some who are not in support and would like to, they support the assessment, but they're not sure about the timing. Maybe there's a better time to look at assessing than the first 2 days of school. So that is really why I want to hear from others to see how widespread is it. Is it just the 3 or 4 that I heard from, or are there more that have concerns about that?
I haven't heard any concerns about it, but what I can tell you, because it came out of the teacher groups, is that the 2 teacher groups that I spoke with, and it was unanimous with them that this is something that they really want to explore and have what in their mind have support from the board in trying to do, because they think it's in the best interest.
Well, and that's what I would say. I heard from a couple, and they said they have a couple more, so how far-reaching is it? Is it those 5, or is it, I just don't know. So I'd like to know that before making a decision.
Director O'Loughlin.
So I would support the survey if we can guarantee that we reach every parent in the district. Because a lot of parents, sometimes when we put out a survey, we're not hearing from all of our constituents, and that's unfair. So I think that if I would support that if we can guarantee that we can reach every single parent, so every single parent has their voice at the table. I'm just going to read a few one in particular, because as Director Pearson mentioned, we've heard from lots of teachers, and this one really struck me. As a veteran teacher of 26 years, I feel this is one of the most positive ideas I've heard of in years. I've heard that some may be concerned about assessing students before we even meet them. I don't think of the reading inventory as a true assessment, but what it is an inventory. The questions that I ask students, and how they read, relate to their own lives and allow time for me to connect with students one-on-one. This is my first year doing the inventory, and I was amazed how well I connected to each and every one of my students. This took an incredible amount of time, which took me away from continuing my units of study. I needed to wait until the inventories were done before I could put the students into their book clubs. This is so pro-student and putting them first. Thank you. And then the teacher's name. So, and like I said, we've received several of those, and I just think, as Superintendent Petrelli said, as a learning organization, oftentimes tough decisions have to be made. Students must be at the center of what our decision-making is, and if this is what is best for kids in terms of more time, just like we heard a speaker say earlier, then I think that we can find ways to work with families and over-communicate the change. I don't know if there's an option for
Adventure Club?
Yes, Adventure Club that can help fill in some of those gaps. But if what our teachers need is time with their students to help develop those relationships and establish a relationship that's based on the betterment of their social, emotional, and academic growth, then I support this.
Director Pelletier.
I also weighed some of the cons that have been discussed, the possible confusing nature of it. But in thinking about this, I really appreciated the previous comment. I believe it was Ms. Karen Lateral, that it's not really an assessment. I think that is kind of a tough word, and to me, it's relationship building. And I cannot even begin to express how elated I would be if I had an opportunity to sit down with my kids and the teacher on a one-on-one basis at the beginning of the year like this. And it's not perfect, nothing is. I guess my hope would be that we adopt this. I'm tremendously in favor of it. Considering the fact that there may be kinks, there really truly may be some kinks. And I guess my hope would be, one, we get some parents on the calendar committee, going forward, or at least have a discussion about that, if that's at all possible. And two, if to Director O'Loughlin's excellent point, Adventure Club or whatever it is, if we can work with some of the families that may have some issues, we don't know how many there are, but just maybe communicate that we will work with these families that may have an issue. But I think sometimes you have to go for it. This is as for the kids as I can even imagine, and I'm very excited about it. So.
Director Potachik.
A question I have, and I've got mixed feelings. I've heard a lot of different things, because I think it is a big switch to go where we were doing this for K to suddenly it's the whole elementary. So I have a question on that. But suppose tonight this motion carries that, and not the motion to delay, but to implement it. How are we going to know after if it's been a success or it worked or not? Now, realize that it wouldn't be implemented till next fall. But even if we do that, how do we know if it's successful or it was so-so or wasn't something we should repeat again? What kind of things might we look for?
I think we look at exactly what we saw this year with kindergarten. But more at a global level, right? Because it's impacting more students and more classrooms. I think we would know based on feedback directly from our teachers and from our families, whether they thought it was valuable, whether we thought that the time was well spent, whether it was enough time, whether all of those tangible and intangible. I think there's nothing stopping us when we go something larger scale like this to do a follow-up survey with our families in particular to find out, because once it's oftentimes one thing to anticipate what the difficulties are going to be, right? Because we had some of the same concerns with kindergarten, but until we do it, we don't know what the reality of those difficulties are. And so I would think that it would behoove us to really garner that input from our families once we're done, in addition to our teachers large scale, because they're, as much as the teachers are willing to, and talking with them and our staff to plan it out the best that they can, just like you noted, the first front three, you're always going to have little kinks. So we're going to need to be following up with them anyway, just like we are right now with Ready, Set, Go. I know that Director Larson is working with them just in the scope of what Ready, Set, Go conferences were in making that better, what worked, what didn't. So to your point, you do have to at some point just live through it and then assess how it went.
And I'm not just picking on this group, but I think oftentimes in education what we do is we go for an innovation, but we don't always look to how did you measure whether it worked or not or didn't work. And so that's because one of the sacrifices we're making here is a whole teaching day for all kids. And what we're putting in its place And it's not without merit. I've heard a lot of teachers. I've read an awful lot of email as well. And it's something that needs to happen. And I do call it an assessment, and I don't call it necessarily a test, because that's what it is. And by definition, it's not evil. It's a good thing. I ought to know where my kids are at. I'm just wondering, particularly in this instance, if this is the best way to go. So, in summary, what I'd like to see if we do this, or even if we don't do it, how would we evaluate, measure it, and kind of even on paper have some of those metrics.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you talk, there will be some very specific pieces of information we'll be able to get from our teaching staff with regard to how well were they able to design and implement earlier interventions for kids that did not do well in these assessments.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'd like to know
we
more
can
about.
easily get that. The second thing will be on the social emotional standpoint. While it does, on a large scale, take out technically 2 days of instruction, you're also taking 2 days where the teacher is spending a significant amount of time with each one of their students, whereas now they're spending with all their students on those days, those first 2 weeks. So the other piece in my mind is being able to get from teachers, did that make a difference? And if so, what difference did that make that you had that time to spend with those kids on those first 2 days of school based upon how you've done it in the past where you haven't had that time? The thing I would end with just on the assessment piece is, let's say, for example, it doesn't go well. We don't have to continue doing it. Right? We can decide at that point in time that we can make changes to make it better, or we can say, you know what, we tried it, we did our best at it, we planned it, we did assess it, and based on that information, the board can come back and say, you know what, we need to do it differently. We got to do it. We like how you go a bunch of different ways with it, but. Until you do it, you won't know.
I had reached out, all board members, I think, got some emails from teachers who were very passionate about this. I found that interesting, given that we're voting on their contract tonight. They were talking about the Ready, Set, Go conference, but after reading through a number of them, this is the ending of one. Trying to complete individualized test with 25 students who are also in the room is not really effective use of teaching time. So if in fact we are trying to give up 2 days of teaching time, yes, but is it quality teaching time if we're trying to sneak in one-on-one meetings at the same time? And then this teacher says what I think you and Mike have just said. So I would say that it would be worth a try next year and then maybe evaluate how helpful we thought it was later next fall to determine if it will happen again or not for the following year. I mean, I would hope that's what we would do, is give it a try. And then for those teachers and board members who have been around, back in the day of Mary Jo Weingarten, she still thought very highly in this district. One of the teachers responded back with, "Thank you for supporting what is best for kids." And that was Mary Jo's longtime assistant superintendent for elementary in this district. And her comment was always, what is best for kids? Not what is best for us as a board, or not what is best for teachers, or not what is best for parents, but what is best for kids. And it was a very short little email that this lady sent, but she said, thank you for supporting what is best for kids. And I think we have to keep that at the forefront. No matter how we vote, I think we have to keep that at the forefront. But I want to thank all those teachers that did send and did answer my inquiries. One where I did hear two concerns. One was, I think we should do this, but I think we should do it in October instead of August. So it's not getting rid of the 2 days, it's just doing it in August or doing it in October instead of August. The other one was, and it concerned me a little bit, was a teacher who said, thank you very much for your email seeking feedback regarding Ready, Set, Go proposal. Unfortunately, your email was the first I've heard about this plan. And so I responded back and said, well, you've been left out of the cold because as a board member, I shouldn't know more than you should know about this. So I don't know if they're not on a literacy team, they didn't go to a meeting, or what the problem was, but that one concerned, I mean, I guess out of all the ones I received, that one concerned me the most. But overall, I mean, it was, 40 of them that were positive and 2 that expressed those concerns, so.
And I'd just like to come on your, the question about August versus October. Our teachers and those who have shared emails with you and those who are in the audience, how they personalize and find out where their kids are happens at the beginning of the year, especially with us, with our start dates. If we wait 6-8 weeks into October, then we aren't personalizing learning for kids. You're giving everybody the same thing. And I know that's one of the things that our teachers really want is information so that they can help give targeted instruction based on kids' interests. And I think one of the pieces that we're missing from this is during those conversations, it's not just the inventory or assessing where the child is so the teacher can be more effective, but it's also having that relationship with that student. And we heard very clearly from our teachers. And I want to just remind the community and the board that this recommendation that we are recommending calendar B+, really is focused on empowering our teachers to help us know what's working for kids. And their voices are important.
Director Pearson.
I just want to be clear to all my board members, I am not opposed to doing these assessments. I just want more information. When I get an email from a kindergarten teacher who would have done the assessments this year, who feels like we need to put the brakes on, maybe it's not the best thing to do for everybody, and has also talked to colleagues who agree, I just want to know that we have been very diligent to make sure that we have made sure that this is the best decision. And I would just make a comment to that. Of course we want to do what's best for kids. I think sometimes there's a question, sometimes what's best for the family is what's best for the kids. And so we have to weigh all of it. So it's just, I am not opposed to doing the assessments at all. I want to make sure that we are hearing from staff, because I did get another one where several didn't know about it. So I just want to know we're doing the right thing. I think it is kind of a big deal and a big change for staff.
I think it's a big deal as well. The one piece that I would add is just to make sure people understand this is coming from the staff. I had the same number of questions when I was first approached with it, and the questions were about, okay, to what degree does this make sense, and how are we going to support it, and can we support it? And then going to our coordinators and our directors and asking them, this is what teachers are talking about, can you support this? Can we get this in a place where it runs as good or better than Ready, Set, Go conferencing did? And then back to the teachers. And in meeting with, again, the one room was full. It probably had 20 teachers in it. And I left that room. The last question was, I'm not comfortable taking this forward unless everybody in this room says this is really what they want to do. And it was unanimous in that room. And I only say that because I just end up being the face of presenting it as the recommendation. All I can tell you is that I support them because of what I heard, and I support our staff because they've assured me that they're able to pull off the support that's needed. And I think it's a great opportunity to truly practice what we talk about with our staff. If we trust our staff that they are the professionals in the classroom and they're the experts with our kids, if we have a large group of them that say, we really want you to try this, does that mean that we won't have one or two that are against it? No, we're going to always have that. We have 560 some staff in the district. However, it's also an opportunity to say we're willing to support what you believe you need, and we're willing to try it, and we'll back it with support, and we'll assess it, and then move on from there. So I just want to make sure that while you did have a couple people that weren't in agreement with it, this is truly grassroots, coming from teachers. We think this is what we need to do.
But that's why, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Shelley.
I was just going to say, but that's why I want to know how, is it 90% of staff? Is it the 40 you've talked to out of 565? That is just seriously what I want to know and would be the reason I would ask for a delay.
Mm-hmm.
Director Stivland.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I'm glad you said all of that because I want to be very clear. I want to support our teachers to be their very best, of course. I think we all do. And this may very well be the best idea that has come along since sliced bread. And I agree with Shelley that, I'm not opposed to this plan per se. I just would like a little bit more time to make sure that we've thought it through. I think we need a few more answers to some questions that are really critical in terms of engaging our parents in any decision that we make, and really making sure that we're not going to cause a huge amount of trouble and discomfort for families right off the bat at the beginning of the year next year without them really being prepared or understanding why. Why is this so important? I'm not satisfied with the answer that this is what our teachers want and this is what we have to do for assessments. That doesn't seem like enough of a good answer. Not that that isn't a good answer, it's just we need more information than that, like a better explanation of why this is really awesome. I also want to say I like the fact that we tried this for kindergarten this year. Kindergarten starting 2 days late is a great idea because they're little, they're brand new, they haven't been here before. We don't have any assessments from any other time. So it makes sense for kindergarten to me. I think it would be great to do that again for kindergarten, absolutely, and see how it goes and continue working on that. Maybe we can learn from that, doing it again this year just for kindergarten. It's just another thought, that we should look at that. I do think that we are doing a lot of assessments on kids. And so if we have students here for their entire kindergarten year and they come back in their first grade year, it seems like we might be able to, have other data that would work. I don't want to open up a conversation about, what the assessment is or anything like that. But I just think we need to put a little bit more thought into it. And the final thing I just want to say is, we live in Minnesota. In Minnesota, we have a tradition that it's an agricultural state. And we start after Labor Day for a reason, because people are needed on the farm. And we have our state fair that's done on Labor Day, and so kids can go to school afterwards. That's in the statute, that we're supposed to start after Labor Day. By starting before Labor Day, we are actually asking for an exception to do that. And so have we done our due diligence to make sure that we're meeting the standards of what the exception should be, both for ourselves as a district, for our community, for the state? Is it really the best? How many of our students are actually fully involved? My entire family is all agricultural, so they were at the state fair a lot of years, and they were there the whole time, not just one day going as a guest and having, your pronto pup, but to actually be there the whole time. How many people in our community are really actually working or volunteering at the state fair? It's a big deal. I think it's a big deal that we need to think through. I think I would just like to reiterate that, all of these things that are what's going on in my head, I do think we need more time to really think this through and make sure that we can be prepared to share with the community exactly why the decision is being made and how it's better, whatever it ends up being.
Okay, any other? Director Pelletier.
Just a question, Dr. McDowell, can you and you probably covered this a little bit ago, but I guess first a comment, then a question. I remain in heavy favor of this because I look at, I'm looking as a parent right now, a parent lens, a mom, especially thinking of my son in this particular moment in time. Yes, it's confusing, and we've never done it before. But if I had the opportunity to create a relationship with my son's teacher at the very beginning of the year, I would be absolutely elated that right from the get-go, that relationship was at the forefront of that teacher. So I just think it is it is the example of putting kids first, in my opinion. Is it perfect? No, it's not. But I am very much in favor of it. And I guess to Director Stivland's comment, can you reiterate, did parents weigh in after the K, after last year? I guess I'm curious about that
just
as well.
Anecdotally. That we just had anecdotal parents weigh in as far as what what went well, what didn't go well across the different buildings, from what principals were told, what teachers were told, and asking teachers how it went, feedback they got from parents, things of that nature.
For this year.
Or for this,
This is right.
Yep, for this
the
year.
kindergarten one,
Yep. So I guess to that end, I guess maybe I would just say it this way. While it came from teachers, the people that I work with get paid to be quote unquote experts in the field of education and have quite a few years of experience, myself included, over 20. This is what I'm recommending as that person sitting in the seat that I sit in. That this makes the most sense at this amount of time based on our kids and based upon our teachers. And that's why I started with, my recommendation isn't an option between two. It's an option of yes or no. I think the questions that you posed, Director Stivlin, with regard to the calendar in general are great questions, but I think it's something bigger that the board maybe wants to look at taking on in terms of parameters around a calendar in general. Because without that, the calendar committee, who's ever on it, is really taking a shot at what seems to make the most sense based on what we've done. And so maybe the points that you're bringing up are the points of there's a part that needs to be done in terms of let's retool, let's relook at what we want from as a board with regard to parameters around the calendar year, because that would provide more direction for the calendar committee on a larger scale to make those managerial decisions around what we actually have to pull off inside of contracts and things like that.
Okay, we've got a motion to table. All those in favor of tabling the 2018-2019 school year calendar, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed? Opposed, nay. Motion is defeated. I guess we move to
Vote on
draft
calendar
B plus on the calendar. All those in favor of accepting draft B plus school year calendar for 2018-2019, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nays?
Nay.
Okay, the ayes have it, so we have B plus for our calendar going forward.
Thank you.
We have two contract items.